Welcome to the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. We've got a great program today. It's on Jersey Shore mysteries. So if you haven't gotten enough of the Jersey Shore this summer, if you weren't able to go or whatever, these mysteries are great. And we've got wonderful authors with us today. We've got Amy Reade, we have Jane Gorman, and we have Jane Kelly. And all of these fine authors have been at our mystery conference at one point or another, our Murder As You Like It mystery conference. So I want to welcome you all today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she will do introductions and she'll get the program started. Now, I just want to remind you, all of their books that are in print are available on our website. We had specially designed book plates that we'll send out. It'll be a signed book plate, since it's a little hard to do these things in person right now. We have a signed book plate that if you buy the book, you'll get the book plate with it. And also, this event is being recorded because we put them up on our website. It'll be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, which is MECH Mystery Books. And for those who can't participate, they can look at it later on. If you don't want your face as a part of the video, then you need to turn your video off or place something over your camera. That always works too. That might be easier. Please keep your mic muted for the duration of the event. When the time comes for questions and answers, please type your questions in the chat box for the authors to review. And I let that up to Amy as to whether she wants the group to answer the questions that you might have during the program, or if she wants to do a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Deb. I hope everybody can hear me. I know I was having some trouble with the audio. Okay, good. I want to thank you for hosting this, and you and your staff at Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop are fabulous to work with, and someday I will get up there in person to the actual shop.
To the actual store, huh?
Yes, yes. But for now, we'll do a Zoom call just like we've all been doing for the last year and a half. So I'm going to get started. I will start with Jane Gorman. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each author, and then we'll launch into the questions from there. So Jane Gorman, formerly an anthropologist and a diplomat and a park ranger, Jane Gorman now writes murder mysteries. Building on her knowledge of Philadelphia, which was her home for many years, and her varied experiences, her Adam Kaminsky mystery series features a Philadelphia cop who manages to solve complicated murders in far-flung locales, both in the United States and overseas. Her Cape May cozy mysteries paint a lighthearted, fun picture of the Cape May life of a former anthropologist who just happens to be good at solving murders and trying out new cocktails. Jane Kelly is a native of Philadelphia, close to the Jersey Shore settings of the McDaniels mysteries from Plexus Publishing. Jane has an MS from Drexel University in Library and Information Science and an MPhil in Popular Literature from Trinity College, Dublin. You'll have to tell us what that is, Jane. She has served as president of the Delaware Valley Sisters in Crime and on the board of the New York chapter of the Mystery Writers of America. Her fifth McDaniels mystery, Greetings from Ventnor City, was published in January 2020. The fourth in the series, Missing You in Atlantic City, won an Independent Publisher Book Award Silver Medal for the Mid-Atlantic Fiction. She's also the author of two independently published series, The Widow Lady Mysteries and The Writing in Time Mysteries, both available via Amazon. She currently lives in the Philadelphia area. I discovered a passion for writing fiction after practicing law in New York City and here in New Jersey. And once I decided to make the leap away from practicing law, I never looked back. I have penned 13 novels, including 3 standalone Gothic mysteries, the Malice series of Gothic novels, the Juniper Junction Holiday Cozy Mystery series, and the Cape May Historical Mystery Collection, which is the collection I'll be talking about today. My books have been on the USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller lists, and I am a member of Sisters in Crime and the Mystery Writers of America. In addition to writing, I love to read, cook, and travel. So I know I'm not sure everybody on this call heard. So my first question is, where are you joining us from today? Because I know Jane Gorman is not near here. And what is your protagonist up to today? So Jane, I'll start with you. Jane Gorman, I'll start with you.
Yes, great question. Thank you. You know, I haven't seen my protagonist Anna in well over a week now because I am in France today for the first time in obviously a year and a half, 2 years, just like everyone else. But I don't know. Took the risk and got on a plane, and I made it. So I'm in the Dordogne region of France in a medieval town called Sarlat, and there's a busker right outside my window on the main square. So there's some music, but it's gorgeous and it's hot. And I love it. And it's even hotter, I think, here than in Cape May. I'm not getting any nice ocean breezes or anything. And I suspect Anna's just, my protagonist, Anna, is relaxing and enjoying the fact that I'm not getting her into more trouble while I'm here.
All right. How about Jane Kelly?
I'm in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, in Chester County, and I'm not even sure we have a French restaurant in town. So it is much less a much less exotic locale that I'm calling in from. My protagonist is down in Avalon, New Jersey right now. So she's probably sitting, it's a beautiful day to be at the beach. I'm sure she's sitting on the deck watching the ocean. And basically that's pretty much all she'll be doing. She'll be relaxing today.
Good for her. Good for her. I am here at my home in Cape May County, in Marmora, and the protagonist of my latest book also is from this area, just up the road, but she lived in 1777. So this being a Sunday, she's a Quaker. She would have gone to meeting this morning and doing as little as possible for the rest of the day. So, but there are chores to be done, you know, pens to muck out and pigs to feed and all that. So she would have been doing that also. So
For a much different reason than Meg is doing nothing.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So Jane Kelly, I have heard the story from hearing you speak at Longport, at the Longport Library and at other events. I know the story of how you became familiar with the Jersey coast, but I'm not sure how many people who are listening here are familiar with the story. So I thought you would share that with us. And then after that, Jane, I would like Jane Gorman. I know you live in Cherry Hill, and maybe you could tell us how you got to know the Jersey Shore a little bit. So Jane Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, the story I believe Amy is alluding to is that when I was a baby, really, my parents used to go to my mother used to go to the shore for the summer, and my father would commute on weekends from Philadelphia where he worked, and she would be down there all summer. And she complained that everyone else got a vacation and she just moved her job. So when I was about 2.5, I got very sick, and she used that as an excuse to never go back because I always had to be rushed to the hospital. Now I was better in like a month or so, but still she never went back. So what happened to me is when, as I got older and I had my summers free, there were friends who would be going down to the shore, usually for a week or two with their parents, and their parents would let them bring a friend. And I became a friend to people who went to Long Beach Island, people who went to Cape May, people who went to Ocean City, the Gardens, people went to Ocean City, the South End. So I got to know a lot of different Jersey Shore towns from that perspective. And when it was time, we wanted to move the stories, the mysteries up and down the coast. We picked the towns in the order that I was familiar with. And that basically came down to where did I don't want to say sponge the most, because I think parents were happy to have somebody to amuse their kids, but I was always ready. So I was always there. So.
Very good.
That is a great story. My story is not as entertaining, I don't think. But yes, I grew up in Cherry Hill. I live there now. I grew up in Cherry Hill. And just it was the thing to go down the shore. You know, each summer I go a week with my family. We actually went to Brigantine usually, but I love Cape May. So I would go to Cape May whenever I could. In fact, my husband and I got married in Cape May. We would go every year for not just our anniversary, but just to visit. So as much as I was more familiar with Brigantine, Cape May was the town that inspired me more, I think, and I had more love for it. But it was just a normal growing up Jersey suburban visiting to the shore for me.
That's nice. I was actually in Cape May last night, and it was beautiful. It was windy, beautiful, perfect weather. I live in Cape May County, and it was actually my husband's idea that I start writing novels set in Cape May, because he said, you live here, you know, this is perfect place for you to do all the research and meet all the people you need to talk to. So he said, you really should write something local. So I did. There's only one book in the collection so far, but I'm working on the second one now.
It is local, but I will say not exactly local. I think your book, you have to do a lot more research than just live in the town.
That's right. No, that's right. And unfortunately, the Cape May Historical Museum, which is down in Cape May Courthouse, that has been closed since the beginning of COVID, and I cannot find any information on whether they're going to be opening up again. I hope they will. You know, the signs are on the doors that say they're closed, and there's a number to call, or yeah, I think there's a number to call. I called, there was no answer. So I don't know. Like, hopefully, they'll open up again, because they're just a font of information, really interesting stuff. So was it spending time at the Jersey Shore that inspired you to set your books here? I know, Jane Kelly, your books have an historical element to them. And so I know, and I've spoken to before about kind of how you go back in time a little bit, not to the 1800s, but usually the mid 1900s to fashion some of your stories. So you're doing the research on both the location and the history of the area, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And so was it spending time down here that, I mean, you could have chosen any locale in the whole world, right, to set your book in. You obviously went to school in Dublin, but you chose the Jersey Shore to set your book.
In a way, the Jersey Shore chose me, because my publisher is in South Jersey. And I'm published by Plexus Publishing, which is an imprint of a company called Information Today. And they do a lot of professional publishing. And the publisher, Tom Hogan, would go to other towns and he would see all these books that were published, mysteries about different location. And he was taking umbrage for South Jersey. He sort of felt like, what's wrong with us? Why is there nothing about us? So when he heard I had written a book that did not get published, and I have a whole other story sometime about my great rejection letters, but it did not get published. He said to me, why don't you think about writing them in New Jersey, which I did. And then that's when I started going through the different towns based on my familiarity with them. But I was really happy to do that. I mean, it gave me a lot of excuses to come down the shore, and for locale investigation, I did a lot of visiting. I would, for Long Beach Island, I actually went and stayed for a month off season. I didn't have time to do that for the other cities, but I would be up and down. And you just have to get everything right, because the people who are reading them are there and they know where you are. And I got a text the other day that made me very happy about the last book, which was the Ventnor City book. And a gentleman had traced my steps and could tell me, and I remember the last thing he said is, there really was an alley beside that restaurant. And there really was. And so I'm very, very careful about that. If something bad's going to happen, I won't use a real place. But generally, I try to make everything else accurate. And, you know, I'll just drive miles and miles and miles. And I know Jane Gorman will have something to say about this. I have a couple other stories about like going overboard. Like when I drove down from Philadelphia, I had Meg slide off a bar stool. And I drove down to the restaurant to see whether or not the covering on the bar stool would let you slide off it, or whether it would hold you in place. And of course, the restaurant closed, changed hands, and it's now been ripped down. So it might have been a little excessive in that way, but I really get into the local research. I don't know if you want me to go on with the historical or how you want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that I just always start at the library. I mean, and in a newspaper morgue. I like to tie the books, the last two books, the Missing You in Atlantic City and Greetings from Ventnor City, to historical events in the city. They're not part of it. I don't have real people as characters in the book. They're in the background, but they're not characters. But I am meticulous about going through and making sure that I have everything about those events right, just like I am about the locales. And that I love. That I can get, well, all of it I can get carried away with, I think. But I love that. I love finding experts and finding people who were there and talking to different people. And people are very willing to talk to you and share their experiences. And sometimes you just get lucky. A friend of mine, one of them is set at the 1964 Democratic Convention. And a friend of mine just happened to march in that parade in her high school band. And she could tell me it started late. Other than that, I probably would never know it was starting late. But you better believe that somebody reading that book knows that it started late. Yeah. And it's sort of a timeline. So it's fun to do.
That's great. Jane Gorman?
Well, the research that I do for my books is a little bit different. My Kate May series is my second series, and my first series had an older male protagonist who travels the world, and he solves murders in each of the places where I have lived or spent extensive time around the world. So the research for that was sort of almost built in some way, because as an anthropologist, for example, when I lived in Warsaw, I had reams and reams and reams of notes about Warsaw and culture, and therefore I had that built in. I didn't have that kind of material handy for Kate May. So it was really just my personal experience of walking around, like Jane said, just walking around and looking, taking different pictures and say, okay, well, this is going to be where Anna's B&B is. You know, of course, it's just some poor person's private home. And the picture is just for my benefit. So I make sure that I'm describing everything correctly. But the other research I have, which is fun, is that I do have Anna being almost ABD, almost a medical anthropologist. And I was an anthropologist in a previous life. And I have a good friend who is a medical anthropologist today. So it's been fun kind of getting back in touch with my own knowledge of anthropology and then expanding that a little bit to study about medical anthropology and the kind of research Anna does. And one of the things that I think, my books are definitely cozy mysteries. And I know what I love in a cozy mystery, and I think a lot of people do, is learning something new. And sometimes that's something, a skill, a hobby, a craft. And I don't see why that can't be about medical anthropology a little bit. It's very, very light. There's no, I wouldn't call my books educational by any stretch, but it's just, it gives her a different perspective on things, a different way of looking at things, at how she evaluates data, how she gathers information, and how she evaluates it and analyzes it. And fortunately, her best friend, Sammy, is not an anthropologist and can poke holes in all of Anna's theories from a real person's perspective, perhaps.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I just finished Scones and Scofflaws, which was the first book in the Kate May series, your Kate May series. And I didn't know there was such a thing as a medical anthropologist. And I just thought it was fascinating. Like, you get into the field of medical anthropology without loading it down with a lot of things that people can't understand. When you say, you know, I take, you know, recipes for remedies that people in Center City, Philadelphia use, you know, perhaps ethnic remedies, and I link them to how people are using those remedies in, say, Mexico, you know, you can see a cultural attachment there, a cultural almost like a timeline as things move from Mexico, say, to Philadelphia. So I thought that was really interesting, and it wasn't in any way dry or heavy. I thought it was really fascinating.
I appreciate you saying that, because the earlier versions were a little heavier and a little drier. And
well, that's why the earlier versions, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I pared down. And then I got to the point where the mentions of her research were so limited. I sent the exact quotes off to my friend who is a medical anthropologist. I said, look, is this still actually accurate? And she corrected a couple of words here and there, but said, yeah, that's That's pretty good. So yeah, it took some effort, and some of it was painful because I love Anna's research. I just think the research that she did was so cool, and I'm really hoping that she will get back into doing it and get back to getting her PhD. But like you said, I'm really glad to hear that. I don't want to bore the reader with that. I'd like to introduce them to the topic, skim the surface of it, but this is not, you don't read these books to learn about medical anthropology.
Right, right. Well, I find that when I'm writing, the research is one of my favorite parts. I could get lost in it. I could just do it for days on end. And, you know, some people will say, like, how do you know when to stop researching, when you have enough information? And I find that I just know, like, I just know there's a point where my brain says to me, I am itching to get going. Let's start writing this. Stop the research. And I can always, you know, you can always go back and research more or research again if you have to. But I just find that there's a time when I know I'm ready to go. And, you know, doing historical mysteries, you know, there's nobody around who can tell me what things were really like in 1777. But, you know, I have just a wealth of information that I can use locally. And there are, you know, experts in Cold Spring Village or places where people are experts in what this area used to look like many, many years ago. The first book in the series was, or it's a collection. The books in the Cape May Historical Mystery Collection, the only things they have in common is that they're mysteries and they take place in this part of New Jersey, in Cape May County. There are no themes or characters that continue through as a thread through each book. But so there's nobody around, you know, who is here. Back in 1777 or 1711, my first book, I remember one of the most fascinating pieces of information I found for my first book was a painting that somebody had done of the original town bank, New Jersey, which is now in the Delaware Bay. But that painting really sort of set off my ideas and my thinking about the region in that period of time. You just never know what you're going to find when you're researching, and it's always going to be something really interesting.
Well, I will say, Amy, that one of the things I loved about your book, that I felt like you brought the history to life. You know, it's not just about knowing who did what when and what the town might have looked like, but you got to get a sense of what people were thinking, what they felt, what they smelled, you know, what things sounded like. And that I love reading that kind of fictional history because it makes me feel like I'm there.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. It you know, it takes a lot of work and a lot of iterations, as you know, to get things to that point, to get your writing to that point where it's ready for people to read so that they can experience it right along with the protagonist. But when it works, it's really rewarding. So
I have something there. I want to say that something both of you know is that you have to know what not to include. You can't include something just because you know it. And it's really tempting to think, you know all that, but if it doesn't make sense and it doesn't help the plot or develop the characters, you just have to walk away from it. And even though you've researched it and you're in love with it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think what they say is, I think they say, you know, you should know 100% of your subject, but only 10% of it should make it into the book.
That
right?
makes sense,
I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. So following on that, Jane Kelly, what's something that you learned during your research from one of your books that never made it into the book? Can you share something, or can you remember anything?
I can remember things about location. It applies to research, both historical and local research, because you can't use every single, it's not a guidebook. So you can't include everything in the mystery, even though so they're the first things that come to mind. And there are things I kind of wish I had included. And I never abbreviate things. I think I mentioned this at Longport. Like I never call Philadelphia Philly. So I never called the Barnegat Lighthouse Old Barney. And I regret that. I should have, because other people will see it as, you know, Old Barney. But it didn't make sense to take her to the lighthouse, you know, looking at that crime. It'd be great to have her trapped on top of it, but she wouldn't put herself in that position. So it has to be something that's logical for the customer, for the protagonist to do, and you know, just makes sense in terms of the plot and the character development. In terms of historical things, I had to leave out a lot. You only really have to allude to what's going on. And I like to put it from the reader's perspective in terms of, like in the Atlantic City book, she works in a restaurant, and very early on, I remember someone wanted me to edit it and put that they were watching the Democratic Convention, which was right across the street, on a TV. And there would be no TV in a restaurant in 1964 in Atlantic City. But I did want to have something more concrete about the convention. So I have that the protagonist just slips in to this convention center to watch Bobby Kennedy give a speech. We don't talk about the speech. There's nothing about the speech. The most significant thing is, I think it was 9 months after his brother's assassination. And I based this on a friend of mine who just did walk into the convention 9 months after the assassination. So I wanted to get that in there, but it had to, you know, just make sense that that's something she would do. But I don't know, I think I lost the train there for a while, but a train of thought, but you know, you just can't use everything. You know, she goes and she sees Martin Luther King, but she doesn't interact with him, you know. So I just don't, a lot of people will put real characters in their books, but I don't, except as background.
Well, I think putting real characters in your book opens up a whole can of worms that you don't necessarily want to be dealing with.
Right.
And not just from a legal standpoint, from the standpoint of people who are experts in the biographies of those people. And, you know, you really don't want to get into a character study of somebody who is a real person when you've got your character to worry about. That's the main person that you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, so I'll have historical events, but they're really in the background. They're not the main focus.
Right.
But I like them to be accurate. And timeline drives me nuts. I always watch the timeline in terms of, like I said about the parade leaving late, it was fundamental to the time of the murder. So there's just a whole lot of things to keep an eye on. And that's enough without worrying what you're saying about bringing into it a sentence that maybe somebody would say that they never said. So
right, exactly. And then Jane Gorman, I know you also have to research cocktails, right? For your book.
It's a tough life.
I know, but somebody has to do it.
Has to do it. Yes.
I read the recipe for the scofflaw, which I'd never heard of, and realized, thankfully, we have all the ingredients here in the house. So one of these days, I'm gonna make them. And then I think I noticed the second book has bee's knees in it, which I've heard of. That's, I assume, a drink with honey in it.
Gin. It's gin, lemon, and simple syrup, actually.
Oh, okay.
Of my bee's knees is one of my favorite cocktails ever. Although the one I'm writing now is a Kir Royale, and it's kind of hard to beat a Kir Royale. I think I've been doing too much research because I have more cocktails than I have books. But the challenge is trying to work the cocktail into the storyline. You know, it has to be relevant. It's not just that, oh, they're going to hang out and have a drink. But I try within each book to make the cocktail somehow relevant to the how Anna solves the murder, one way or another.
Sorry, my phone's ringing. Hang up on it. Sorry. Let's see. So, what is your favorite place at the Jersey Shore? Jane Kelly, go ahead.
I don't really have one favorite place. Well, in a way I do, and it's not in any of the books, and it's not a town. I love the Oyster Creek Inn. It's, I don't know how many people go there. It's north of Atlantic City. It's a little old kind of, it looks like a fishing village. So every time we go there for dinner, we take multiple pictures. So if I had to pick one spot that I like, it would be there, because no matter where I am, whether I'm on Long Beach Island, Atlantic City, Benton, or Ocean City, I can get there. So that might be, it's kind of cheating. But every town's different, and every town has a different charm to it. And I always think of Long Beach Island as being very, very beachy. Cape May is very historical. There's so much to see. It'd be a wonderful town if there were no ocean there. It would still be a great town to visit. Even within Ocean City, there are different neighborhoods you like to go to. I mean, I love being up in the gardens, and there are a couple there's a restaurant there. Restaurants are a theme here, you'll notice. Up right out on the beach, and that's great to go to. And the South End's completely different. So I can't say, they're all different. So I can't say I have a favorite, but I always get to Oyster Creek somehow.
Yeah. I've seen those.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, see, I would say that agreed, every town has its strengths and its joy that it brings. But when I think of the shore, for me, my place, if you will, is sitting with my back to the dunes, looking out into the water. And I could do that in any town. I prefer an emptier beach, probably not alone in that. That was one thing that Brigantine does provide. It's a relatively empty beach, but you can get that in Cape May too at certain times of year. But just sitting, knowing the dunes are behind me, knowing the birds are circling overhead over the dunes, and looking at the water. And one of the things that I love about being able to write about the shore is trying to capture that serenity, that peace, that, like I said, that joy that I know that brings me. And I hope it brings other people as well. If they can't go, then at least through my books. But just that's the place.
I would have to say, because I've never been to the Oyster Creek Inn, is that what it's called?
Oyster Creek Inn, yes.
Well, I've never been there, so now it's on my list. But I would also say there's maybe not one particular place, but it is really, really nice to go, especially off season, to the beaches down here and just, go for a walk or sit on the beach and read a book. Strathmere happens to be my favorite because it's typically the least crowded. In the summertime, I like it because they don't require beach tags, and same thing. It's just seems to be the least crowded place. But I do really like to do that. So keeping these things in mind, I'm wondering what is the most fun thing about writing about the Jersey Shore, and does it have anything to do with what you love most about down here? Jane Gorman, why don't we start with you?
Well, honestly, yeah, I think for me, the best part of writing with the shore is writing about that, because it helps me, like, as I'm writing it, first of all, like Jane said, getting to go more frequently and spend time there and getting myself in that frame of mind. But even when I'm back in Cherry Hill or in France and I'm working on my book, it takes me there. And there's no question the shore is my happy place. It's with all the horrible stress and miserable things we've all been going through for the past year, being able to take a couple hours a day and put myself there mentally as I'm writing, that is the best. That is the best thing about being able to write a book that takes place at the shore.
How about you, Jane?
Just that I go so many times, and I go to different places than I would normally go. And I may catch up with friends while I'm down there, but I do a lot of solo driving around, looking at places in a different way than I otherwise would. And I get to know a lot of different towns. And I agree with you. It really is just, if you have your back to the dunes and the sea, the sand and the ocean is there. And I particularly like off season, because then it's empty. And I'll go to the beach and sit in a beach chair and wear woolen gloves. And read. That's fine with me. As long as I can stand the wind on my face, I can deal with that. So yeah, it's just fun to have to look at all different aspects. I meet people because they are local experts and they help me. I try a lot of different businesses because I try to, you know, incorporate a little bit of what's in the town and what the town is like. It's just opens the town up to you in a completely different way than it would if you weren't writing about it. So that's really fun. I like, because Meg is always a tourist. She's never an expert,
Right.
but she has to talk to experts, or I do, to find out, you know, what's behind certain things. So yeah, I like doing it. It just opened a whole new world to me.
I liked the story, Kate Mayhem, when Meg is in town. I believe it's January or February, right? Because she's staying in the bridal suite all by herself
Right.
at a bed and breakfast, and it's, you know, it's just kind of depressing in a way, but it fits so perfectly with the story and with her personality. And I really like Meg Daniels, and I can see, you know, I can definitely tell in reading your books that you spend a lot of time doing the research and knowing what you're talking about.
Well, the ironic part about that story is that I wrote that. She wins that trip. So that's how she happens to be there during what I call parking season in Cape May, because it's the only time you can be guaranteed. Things kind of shut down between January 1st and then that Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend. So really, she's there at a desolate time. So I wrote the book imagining that. And then I was living in Boston, and I went to a B&B up near there to proof it when I got the galleys. And people treated me the way the guests are kind of wary of the woman alone at the Cape May B&B. And up there, people treated me that way. So I found out that my research, or my lack of research in that case, was true. And then I think I told you on the ferry going home, people came over and talked to me. They had gotten the story from the owner. So clearly they had asked what I was doing there alone and why I was there alone. So sometimes it's in a different order. I actually wrote it and then left it in that case.
That's funny. I guess if I would have to say my favorite part about writing mysteries set down here at the shore would be that I guess it's similar to what any historical fiction writer would do, which is you can take a real place and a real time and kind of change it, add your own historical bent to it, add a story that, you know, maybe didn't really happen but could have happened. The story I'm writing now is set during the Revolutionary War. This part of New Jersey, this very southern part of New Jersey, was not heavily involved in the Revolutionary War. However, you know, troops were in Philadelphia, troops were in, you know, just up the road, a little farther north, in New Jersey. And so I can take those stories that I have heard and incorporate them into what I'm writing. I would say that's my favorite part, and not just about writing stories set at the Jersey Shore, but writing stories that are set anywhere. You can take, you know, you can take real places and real events and kind of shift them and change them and use a little bit of artistic license, even if you have to change facts around a little bit, to make it something that is interesting, and hopefully will teach people something. So, are there problems you have run into using real places in your writing? I have not run into any problems because, like I said, nobody really knows what it was like in Cape May County back in 1711 or 1777. So I haven't run into any issues like that. But the two of you write about this area of New Jersey in more contemporary stories. So I'm wondering if there are any issues you've run into with using real places.
Well, I do try to be, I'm very careful about anything. I invent places. And so I found, you know, I used an empty field, a yard that hadn't been built upon yet, and I put a bar there. you know, so that that's where things can happen, because I don't want to run the risk. I think I do talk about Congress Hall actually in one of my books, but I do make sure that nothing bad happens there. And that's anytime anything even remotely bad is going to happen, it's a made up location.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. If it's going to be bad, I make it up. I've gotten very little negative feedback from, you know, readers who see ours. And one, I remember I still researched it and I still agreed with what I had done. So, but I found out there's basically 3 types of errors you can make, I find, having gone to the shore my whole life. I may have called something, given it a name my entire life. That's what I called it. And in fact, that may not be what other people call it. Like, to me, the Barnegat Bay is the Barnegat Bay. The whole thing is the Barnegat Bay. But there are little bodies of water, and I'm real purist. Most readers were fine with it's the Barnegat Bay. But a couple of people pointed out, well, actually, he was passing through this. And well, I don't think that damages it, but that's kind of a type of error. There's a simple typo. When I transposed the list of police departments on Long Beach Island, I missed one. I can't remember which one it was now, trying to blot it out. And the one that bugs me the most is Long Beach Island has so many towns that I knew this one, I wanted to include this one restaurant. And I called them and asked them what town they were located in. And as I always say, you would think they'd know, wouldn't you? But they didn't. Yeah. They gave me the wrong town. So, but really, aside from those 3, and oddly enough, all Long Beach Island, where my publisher has a house, I didn't really hear too much back. But I do try to be confusing if it's something bad's going to happen, not make it clear where it would be.
So what about the possibility of setting any of your stories in a place other than the Jersey Shore? Or one thing I've noticed is from reading books by both of you is that, you know, they tend to stop at a certain point on the Garden State Parkway and not go any farther north. So, you know, Jane Gorman, for you, it's Cape May. For me, it's Cape May County. So it's exit 25 on the Parkway. For you, it's exit 0. For Jane, it's much farther up, Long Beach Island, which I think is like 62 on the Parkway, right? And then do you go up to Seaside Heights? Okay, Seaside Heights. Yeah. You know, would you ever set your mysteries farther up north? I wouldn't, because I don't know the area and I haven't been there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jane.
I'm a South Jersey person. Yeah, I mean, and why write about something you don't know? I would have Anna might take a trip to France or London or something, but not North Jersey.
I actually, because of reader requests, wrote a book that was set in Seaside Heights. And I actually ended up independently publishing it because it was too far north for my publisher, or my editor, really. He didn't like that it was set in Seaside Heights. But I got to know Seaside Heights. I really spent a lot of time there and I liked it. And again, she's a tourist. She doesn't know it well. So, but now I'll never go that far north again. I mean, that's it. And I think that's 98. I think you were right about Long Beach Island. It's probably 62, but.
Okay, anyway. Okay. Yeah. I know because the Costco is near there.
Oh, okay.
I've never actually been to Long Beach Island, so I don't know. I know my husband's family used to spend time there when he was very little, but I go to the Costco, so that's all I know.
We should keep going someday and drop by Long Beach Island.
I know. One of these days I will. Well, it's 3:43, so we're sort of getting to the end of my questions. I have a couple more questions, and then if people want to start popping up in the chat with any questions of their own, please feel free. Since the beginning of the pandemic, have you, I know Jane Kelly, I know the answer to this, Jane Gorman, but both of you can address it. Have you been able to make the appearances down here? I'll start by saying I have not been able to make any appearances down here except for there's a sheep farm here in Cape May County where I have been able to sell books. in person. And I will probably do a little bit of that this fall, but I don't have any speaking engagements or book signings scheduled. So how about you two? Anything? I know, Jane, you've been to the Longport Library.
Yeah, I went to the Longport Library, and that was the first thing I had scheduled. And I scheduled it because it was an outdoor event. But as so often happens with evening events in the summer, a huge storm front came through an hour or two before. They closed the beaches. They took everyone off the beaches. So we had to move inside. But luckily, there was a very large room available. So I think only one person opted not to come inside. They were notified in advance. I will be at the block party in Ocean City. Again, something when things were looking like things were getting better. I scheduled that. But aside from that, no, I'm just not scheduling anything. What about you, Jane? Are you?
No, I'm not scheduling anything. It's such a crazy time. I know it's so bizarre. And it's frustrating because sometimes you're like, well, I really could have done that. You know, that would have been safe, but you don't know. You like with the rain, like you don't know what's going to happen. So no, not yet, unfortunately.
I know that Kate May Mack, the Mid-Atlantic Center for the Arts, has so many things going on all the time. You know, last year everything was canceled. This year, you know, it's really been getting going a little more this summer. And I had contemplated signing up for one of their events later in the fall as a vendor, but I've decided not to do that this year. So, yeah, you know, hopefully next year everything will be a little more open and a little more relaxed, and we can do things like that again.
I sure hope so.
And so last but not least, what is next? What is next for Meg Daniels? What is next for Anna Mcgregor? And I will talk about what's next for me too. Go ahead, Jane Gorman, you can go first.
So Anna Mcgregor is currently solving a murder at a local winery in Cape May. And in the process of doing that, she is once again reconsidering her decision to drop out of her PhD program. So I think what's next for her is to really think about some choices. You know, one of the reasons I made Anna a young woman, because she's only in her 20s, is that she can make some bad decisions and then learn from them and move on. And we can't really blame her, because I know when I was 26, I made a lot of really bad decisions, or at least questionable. You don't always have the wisdom of age. So Anna's going to make a few more bad choices, unfortunately, before settling into perhaps a more stable life.
That's exciting. Jane Kelly, how about you?
Just last Tuesday, I turned in a manuscript of the next Meg Daniels mystery. It's set in Avalon, and it's set, for people who are familiar with Avalon, or if they're not familiar, I should say, there's a section of Avalon where there are 12 or 13 houses that are very isolated, that sit on big wooded oceanfront lots. So they're very different. So that's where that's set. And I think I mentioned this, Jane, at Longport, I think that was a really good thing for the pandemic, because I couldn't get out and do what I would normally do in terms of research. So by keeping her isolated there, I don't feel like I've missed as much, but it's kind of different in the field because it's not so much out on the town as the others. But I don't know when that'll be out, but that's what's next for her. How about you?
Congratulations on finishing it. That's great.
Thank you.
I am still working on the second book in the Cape May County or Cape May Historical Mystery Collection. It's called A Traitor Among Us. And after that, I was going to set one at Congress Hall, but I have not decided for sure yet. I've been having second thoughts about that. So once this Revolutionary War one is done, I am going to decide what time period I want to do next, because I'm just jumping from the 1700s to the mid 1900s, and I'm setting 7 or 8 books during that time period, so I have a little leeway to play with time periods. So that's what I'm doing next. We have a chat box here. Let's see. Oh, Maddie Dalrymple has said, Jane Gorman, how about a dark and stormy for one of your Anna books? I don't even know what a dark and stormy is, but it sounds good. So
I actually like it dark and stormy. That's a very good drink. Yes, it was a dark and stormy night, perhaps, as a title. No, that's
like that.
Yes, that is a fun one. That is a fun one.
Does anybody else have any questions? I guess I'm seeing what's coming to everyone. I don't know if the bookstore is getting questions that I'm not seeing, or
You're getting the same questions we get.
okay. So does anybody have any questions? Because we can.
I have a question, Amy. I have a question for you, in fact.
Okay.
So what inspired you to do, and you talked about this a little bit, but why so far back in history in Cape May?
I think it's partly because Cape May, that's when Cape May started. Back in the mid 1600s, Captain Cornelius May sailed this part of the mid-Atlantic coast and found this area, discovered basically Cape May. I did not want to set a book that far back, only because there was nobody here then that I could write about with any kind of expertise. There were Native American tribes, but I didn't think I could do a good job with a book about Native American tribes, because I'm not familiar enough with the culture. So I started it in the early 1700s, which were when the Europeans started to come into this part of the country. I really wanted a collection that would show the growth of Cape May really from its very earliest beginnings. I will not bring it up to the present time because there are already a lot of good Cape May books out there about the present time. You two have written 2 of them. So there's no need for me to do that. I think that I haven't decided yet when I'm gonna stop, but probably right around World War II. There are still a lot of people in this area who remember what it was like during the years of World War II. So it would be interesting to talk to them. And I find that I'm just able to explore really the growth of Cape May in a lot of ways by choosing different time periods. So, let's see. Linda has asked us to tell about the first thing you ever wrote. Does anyone want to take that first?
I can take it because the
Okay.
first thing I ever wrote was the Ocean City book. And I was 40-some when I wrote it, maybe just 40. And aside from a 4th grade attempt with a group of girls with whom I cleaned the lunchroom, we were convinced it was an honor. I had written really nothing longer than a postcard in the interim, but I read like crazy. And I think that's important. I probably should have been writing. I should have been taking classes. I should have been going, getting involved with a network of writers. I didn't, but the one thing I did right was I read so much. And that was the first thing I wrote.
Okay. Jane Gorman?
Yeah, that's fun. I apologize, but the busker has turned up his volume, and I know it's really loud out there. But the first book that I wrote, I wrote nonfiction because as an academic, I wrote published articles. But my first fiction that I wrote was actually science fiction. I wrote a book yes, it was about a robot. This book was never published and it never will be, unfortunately. I still love the story. I think he was a great character. But anyway, it was my first book, so it was not meant to be, I suppose. And after that, I realized that, as Jane said, I read a lot and I read mysteries. So it occurred to me that perhaps I shouldn't be writing science fiction. I should be writing mysteries. And so I moved on to the Adam Kaminsky series. But yes, I did first write a sci-fi book about a robot who could only live for 30 days. And then he got replaced. It was fun. It was called 1 Month.
Oh.
In my mind.
The first fiction book I wrote was, or the first fictional piece I wrote, became the book Secrets of Halstead House, which is set in the Thousand Islands in northern New York, fairly close to where I grew up. Let's see. Linda also wants to know, do you try to write a certain number of words for a certain number of hours a day, or does your work day vary a lot? I can take that one. I'll show you a stack of scenes that I write on index cards, and I try to get through one scene a day. They have to average a little under 1,000 words. So I try to do a scene from my cozy mystery series, and then a scene from my historical mystery collection at different times during the day. So how about you, Jane Kelly?
Mine varies a lot, but I'm trying to get more organized. Now that I handed in that last manuscript, I'm gonna try to set up a stricter schedule for myself. And I think it's really wise what you do. And I think addressing it scene by scene makes it manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems like a really appealing way to go.
How about you, Jane?
I do try to do a scene a day, but I am limited in time. So I do an hour a day, and hopefully I can get a scene done. Sometimes I don't, but that is the time that I have. So
Dorothy wants to, would each of you please name your latest published book? So Jane Gorman, why don't you start?
Goats' Bodies and the Bee's Knees.
Okay.
Mine is, I'm Kelly, Jane Kelly, and it's Greetings from Ventnor City.
All right. And my latest was Mayday, which is the 5th book in the Juniper Junction holiday cozy mystery series. And the last book, in the only book actually that's out in the Cape May collection, is Cape Menace. Let's see. Richard says, a classic interview question is, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you see your characters in 5 years? Jane Kelly, go ahead.
I'm having trouble with the character because I got her engaged at the end of the Atlantic City book, and I'm reluctant to get her married. And I don't know how long I can keep her engaged. So it's really problematic for me right now. So I guess I could start to get her married and have someone interrupt the wedding, but I don't think that would be wise. So as for me, I have no idea where I'll be, but I'm worried more right now about where she'll be in 5 years.
Jane Gorman.
Yeah, I've taken a tactic of, even though my book might take a year to write and get out, they each take place after about 2 months, partly because I have this, who I think is a very adorable little 8-year-old, and I don't want him to grow up too fast. So in 5 years' time, it'll probably be a year and a half later for Hannah.
Yeah.
So she'll probably still be running her B&B and trying to figure out what to do with her life, I suspect.
Well, since my characters don't go from one book to the next, I can confidently say that I don't know where my character will be in 5 years, and I don't even know who it's going to be. So once I figure that out, certainly we'll get an answer for that. Linda also wants to know, do you outline your whole book first, or does your protagonist surprise you as you go along? I can answer that one. First, I showed you the big stack of index cards that I use. I follow, it's more or less an outline, but just not in outline form. I rarely get surprised, only because I know there are lots of authors who say, you know, my characters like to surprise me and I never know what's coming. My view of that is I'm in charge of these people and they're going to do what I tell them to do. So I get so little of that in the rest of my life. They're going to do what I tell them to do. And so I do not get surprised as I go along. But Jane, Kelly, how about you?
I get surprised. And that's because I'm what they call a pantser. I tend to just start writing. I have a general idea of where I'm going, but I haven't completely plotted it out. As I said, I'm going to become more of a plotter, but I think the characters will still surprise me because as they end up in different situations, I know them better. I mean, my main character, I know what she's going to do, but I'm getting to know all these other characters. So yeah, they change a lot by the time I've been with them for a long period of time. So they surprise me.
I love the way you said that, Jane. That's perfect because I am very much a planner. I do a complete outline. I'll start with a sort of a summary of the book, turn it in that line. I use note cards. I write scene by scene. But I do have a second, Sammy, one of my secondary characters, and I've been thinking about her a lot. And she has so much more complexity than I've put in the first 3 books. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where she goes. Will that be a surprise? I mean, I will plan it out, but in some ways it is a surprise because I'm getting to know her better, like you said, and that can be fun.
I
Yeah, I
want
like
to actually change the killer at the end. I don't know if either of you have ever done that. I'm sorry, Amy.
I did that once.
Yeah.
I did. I had to do that once. Yeah.
Well, sometimes, you know, you back yourself into a corner and you realize that the killer you had planned all along isn't going to work. And, you know, that's sort of a mistake in outlining, I think. But yeah, that's happened to me. But you know, for the most part, I pretty much know how they're gonna behave and end up. Let's see, it's 4:01. Deb, we've taken up the hour from 3 to 4 o'clock. And do you want to close us out?
I sure will.
Okay.
I want to thank all of our authors, Jane Kelly, Jane Gorman. I want to thank Amy for moderating and for also participating. And thank you all for attending. You know, if it wasn't for all of you guys, we wouldn't be in existence. And so I thank you so much for participating in our programs. Again, the books are available on Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop's website, or give us a call, 717-795-7470. And we also take the orders by phone. So you don't have to necessarily have a computer. Although if you're watching this right now, yeah, probably got one. So without further ado, thank you so much to everyone and have a great day that's left of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Jane and Jane. Enjoy the rest of your trip.